Today, I'm going to be drawing one of the most iconic characters in the history of fiction, Superman, in 10 different styles, but I'm putting a bit of a twist on this video. I'm not going to tell you what style I'm drawing him in. You have to guess in the comments. List them out from 1 to 10, guessing what animated series style you think I'm drawing in. And at the end of the video, I'll give you the answers so you can see how many you got right. But hopefully, I'm good enough at drawing in these styles that you can figure out which one it is. I mean, I guess if you've never seen the show I'm drawing him in the style of, you won't be able to figure it out, but whatever, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's get cracking with the first style. Alright, now this first one's from a show that I really love, but the art style itself, well, it works really well in the animated series. It's not a style that I'd personally normally want to draw in, because it's kinda creepy and a bit unsettling. It's also, drawing it still, the image looks a little bit flat just because there's not normally any cell shading when the characters are being animated in the show. And the most iconic thing about this visual design is probably the eyes, or that's the thing that stands out to me the most, because the pupils of the eyes in this series are not done as a circle or a ball like they normally would. They're done in these creepy little X-hatch star kind of things. And when I first watched the series in HD and noticed that, I was so unsettled by it. It's just so weird looking. But this was still a fun one to draw and a good one to start with. So here's... oh yeah, I can't say the show name. Okay, well here's the first one. Now this next style is from a show that admittedly I've only watched the last season of it, but it was such a cool looking last season that I feel like I should go back and watch the whole thing. And stylistically, it's very impressive. But it was also a bit more complicated to draw for me because I had to change up my usual workflow since the characters have almost no line work to them. They have a tiny bit for like chest and abs, and if a part of a body part is overlapping another, that's the same color they'll add in lines. But for the most part, it's just blocks of color. So I had to use different layers, then attach the layers together. Another thing that I'm noticing about this challenge is that I have to decide for each style what the Superman logo should look like, because the Superman logo, while it's always the same general shape, it does change up a lot. So for each of these animated series, I have to think of, okay, how would it look different in this series? Because for this style specifically, because everything's a little bit sharper, I felt like I had to draw the Superman S in a sharper, more direct style. And I think it's kind of cool looking. So here's the second drawing. Make sure you're leaving your guesses in the comments. Alright, now this next one up is very near and dear to my heart because it's one of my favorite animated series ever made. In fact, it's probably one of my favorite TV shows ever made. It might be a little bit less well known because it only ran for 2 seasons, but it wasn't canceled because it was bad or had bad ratings. There were lots of people watching it and it is very well loved, but there was... well, you know what, I don't want to get too into it because I don't want to start giving stuff away. I will say that the style was actually designed, or mostly designed I think, by an artist that I'm actually a huge fan of, and he's really awesome. His name is Sean Cheeks Galloway, and if you don't know him and you like this kind of style that I'm drawing right now, I highly recommend you go check out his work because he's just such an incredible artist. His work is so stylish, it's very... I don't want to say flat, but he doesn't do a ton of shading, and his art is still incredibly dynamic and awesome looking, and I am biased, but this is probably one of my favorite drawings of the batch. So here's Superman in, well, that style. Alright, this next style is from a show that I just recently binge-watched, and I absolutely loved it. I was super impressed. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that I would normally like, so I assumed I was gonna like it going in, but even with that, I was very, very impressed with this show. But this drawing, well, it seemed like it should have been kind of up my alley, because it's a bit closer to my normal style. I think I actually goofed this one up a little bit. You might not be able to guess what it is, even if you are a frequent watcher of the show. Hopefully the face is what gives it away, and maybe the rendering. But the problem is, when I was looking for reference images to draw this image, I looked for some images from the show, but then also some promo art, and realized that the promo art can be kind of different rendering from what's in the show, which that's sort of frequent, but I didn't know which way to go with this drawing. In the promo artwork, there's generally more solid blacks on the character instead of just a normal layer of cell shading like in the show, but hopefully it's not too far off and you can figure out what this one is. This next one, I'm admittedly not too concerned about anyone getting this one wrong. It would be pretty surprising if anyone did, and you'll see why at the end. And admittedly, I had to not look at too many reference images for this one, specifically because I'm pretty sure Superman has shown up in this show before. I mean, I would be surprised if he hadn't at some point after I drew this. I looked him up and found a few images of him in the style of this show, so that could have been fan art or he could have shown up. I'm not totally sure, but either way, you're very likely gonna get this one. And admittedly, there were a few other shows that are actual DC shows like Young Justice and Teen Titans Go that I wanted to draw Superman in those styles for this video, but when I was about to get on to drawing those, I realized that Superman has made appearances multiple times in both of those shows, so I thought, let's stick with shows mostly that he hasn't shown up in, but this of course is the one excuse in the video. So here's this style. Place your guesses. Just jumping in here for 1 second to say please leave a like if you're enjoying yourself, and subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see more like this in the future, and tell me what other characters you'd want to see me do this with in the comments. Okay, back to the video. Now this next one is from a show that I really love. I think I've watched it all the way through about 3 times. It's another one that's relatively short. I think there's only, 2 or 3 seasons of it, and again, wasn't canceled because it was bad. It's a very well-loved show. And it's one that people of any age group can kind of love. It's more targeted at kids, but I can really see someone of any age liking it. But in terms of drawing it, the style was actually... It's one of those ones where it's weird because it's difficult because it's a pretty simple style, and so I had to find some... It was also hard to find reference images of a muscular character from that show. I didn't really think about that, and that was a problem for a bunch of the styles in this video. I couldn't find many muscular characters in the styles of the show, so for some of them I had to kind of figure out for myself what a muscular character would look like in that style. But this one, I also admittedly added a little bit of cell shading to it just to give it a bit more depth. Usually in the show, there's not cell shading unless it's some kind of intense lighting situation, but I think it'll still be decently recognizable for anyone who's watched the show. So here's this one. Alright, next up we've got another show that was pretty shamefully canceled after 2 seasons like some of the others we've covered. This one, I don't actually know the story behind why it was canceled, but I'm pretty sure it was a pretty well-loved show, so it might have been something with the studios or whatever. And while I do love the show that this style is from, I was never actually a huge fan of the style itself. I might end up changing it up a little bit from what it actually looks like, and again, this one is probably even less well-known than some of the other shows, so it might be harder for people to figure out which one it is. It's also not a super stylistic style, so it might be that much harder to pick out, but hopefully someone gets it. At least I'll be impressed if a few people get this one. But yeah, this was still a fun one to draw, and I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out, though the bigger flowy cape kind of makes Superman look a little bit more like some kind of weird Overlord or something. But anyway, here's the final result of this style. Alright, now we've got a pretty iconic design that I kind of butcher. This is one of the ones that I don't do as good of a job with. It's a more detailed style, and I probably should have put more time into it. But it's also another one where there were a bunch of different reference images I could have gone with, because the show isn't just a show. I won't go into it too much. I think the style will still come through from how I draw the face and the eyes, but you'll probably, when I get to the end of this one, you'll see like, oh yeah, Christian messed this one up a little bit, but it's not bad. The character looks very kind of shiny, and the muscles are very bubbly looking, which is kind of a thing in the actual show, but not to the extent that I did it here. So this one, ends up looking a little bit goofy. Also, the feet and knees I do kind of wonky, but anyway, here's how this one turned out. Take your guess. Next up is a style that I hadn't actually seen in a while. When I was coming down to the end, I was having trouble thinking of what shows to do next, so I just looked up popular shows from my childhood and I remembered this one and I was like, oh yeah, I was a big fan of. This is actually the style used for 2 or maybe even more kinds of shows. It's a very similar aesthetic, and it was like the same company made the shows. But I had one in mind, but if you guess either of the 2 shows, I'll give you the points for that one. But this is probably one of the simplest ones. There is a little bit of cel-shaded lighting that I add on near the end that makes it a little bit more detailed. But overall, this is a pretty, very cartoony, very blocky. This is another one where it was hard to find a picture of a muscular character from the show to reference so that I could draw Superman in his usual build. And I kind of made this guy look maybe a little bit too broad, but I think it still does a decent job representing the style of the show. So here's this one. Alright, now last up, this one is kind of a freebie because I'm just going to tell you this is me drawing in my usual style. And, I mean, by usual style, people who follow this channel know my style has been evolving lately and shifting and changing. I just figured out a new coloring technique that I really like, where when I'm doing the cel shading, I erase part of what I've done with a really light eraser and then add some more subtle details into the shadows, so it's kind of like there's multiple layers of cel-shaded shadows. But I really like how this is coming along. I think from this drawing, well, I do really like how the rendering turned out for this one. I think I can probably change up the style that I draw bodies in, and that's something I appreciate about having done this challenge, is I feel like I can change up my style a bit more now that I've practiced some other people's styles and see oh, I kind of like how this animated series draws people's arms, or how this series draws people's legs. This is a really good challenge to try and figure out what you want to do with your own style if you want to change anything up. But anyway, here's what Superman looks like in my style. Alright, now for the answers, and if you got some of these wrong, you can just blame it on me because it was probably my fault for not drawing the style accurately enough. But anyway, here they are. Alright, in order from 1 to 10. Number 1, Rick and Morty. Number 2, Samurai Jack. Number 3, Spectacular Spider-Man. Number 4, My Hero Academia. Number 5, The Simpsons. Number 6, Gravity Falls. Number 7, Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Number 8, Dragon Ball Z. Number 9, Danny Phantom. And of course, number 10, my style on PopCross Studios. I'm curious to see how many you got right, and if you edit your comment and change your answers, I'll know, because it'll say that you added your comment. Alright everybody, that was a lot of fun. And more fun than I thought it was gonna be. I was a bit nervous going into this video, but that was kind of a blast. So I might do it again with another character. Who would you want to see? Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, Batman? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this and aren't already subscribed, subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when new videos are coming out. And leave a like if you enjoyed yourself, that'd be super helpful. But besides that, I'll see you all in the next one. I'm Christian Pearson of PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. And that's the end of the video. Goodbye!